He rode in low, the dust swirling at his heels. The sun hung heavy in the sky, beating down on the land like a forgotten memory. The horse's hooves dug into the dry earth, each step loud in the silence. His eyes scanned the empty horizon before settling on the ranch house. The place looked as worn as the man himself, old, tired, quiet. He swung off the horse with practiced ease, his boots hitting the ground with a thud. He didn't bother tying the reins. I didn't need to. The porch was still. A young woman stood there, sweeping. The broom moved slowly, methodical. She didn't look up as he approached, didn't even flinch at the sound of him. It was like she knew he was coming. He stopped at the foot of the steps, watching her. The rhythmic sound of the broom against the porch, the soft swish, swish, filled the air. He cleared his throat. Once, twice. She didn't acknowledge him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low but not unkind. She stopped sweeping, a quick motion of her hand pulling the broom away. She turned to face him, her eyes unreadable. Her face, too young, too familiar, was set in that same hard expression, the one that carried weight, the one that carried a past. "Name's Evelyn," she said, each syllable like it had been carved out of stone. His gut tightened. The name hit him like a fist. His breath caught, and his heart stuttered in his chest. He didn't blink, didn't speak at first. He could feel the tension rising between them, thick in the air, like smoke from a fire that had long since burned out. Evelyn. The name echoed in his mind, and for a second, the world around him fell away. His eyes stayed locked on hers, and something in his chest twisted. "No," he said, shaking his head. "No, it can't be." She didn't move, didn't speak, just wait. His eyes scanned her face, the angles of her jaw, the way her hair fell over her forehead. There were bits of dirt smeared across her cheek, as if she hadn't bothered to wipe them away. But it was more than that. It was the shape of her, the way she stood, the way she watched him with that cold, calm stare that made his skin prickle. It was too much like someone he had known, someone he'd lost. "What's your last name?" he asked, his voice sharp now, more demanding than before. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Reed," she said, "like it says on the mailbox." The man's hand tightened around the leather reins of his horse. The name sent another shock through him, deeper this time. His breath came faster, his pulse quickening. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He needed to speak, needed to say something, but the words wouldn't come. "I knew Reed," he muttered, mostly to himself. "A long time ago." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "And now you know another." Her voice was even, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of the dust. He swallowed, hard, his throat dry, and took a step forward, trying to collect himself. "You look like her," he said, his voice strained. "Like my daughter. She had the same eyes, same face, same what?" Her voice was suddenly sharp, cutting through his words like a knife. "You think I'm someone else? Someone you lost?" The man stopped, taken aback. She was looking at him now, like she could see right through him. He hadn't expected that. "No, I didn't mean that," he said, shaking his head again. You remind me of someone." Her eyes softened, just barely, but there was a hardness in them that remained. Something unresolved, a wall he couldn't climb over. She looked down at the broom in her hand, then backed up at him. "You're not the first to think so." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. He wanted to ask more, wanted to know what she meant, wanted to demand answers, but something in the way she stood there told him she wouldn't give them. Not now, not yet. She turned her back to him then, as if the conversation was over. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as she picked up the broom again and began to sweep. There was no more emotion in her now, just the steady back and forth of the bristles on the wood. The man stood still, rooted to the spot. His heart was still pounding in his chest. The name, the face, it was too much. He had come here for something else, something entirely different. But this was not what he had expected. He wanted to turn away, wanted to walk back to his horse and ride out of this place, forget about this ranch, forget about her. But he couldn't. Not yet. Something pulled him forward, something deeper than just recognition. He had to know what this was, had to understand the connection that kept nagging at the edges of his thoughts. "Evelyn," he said again. this time softer, almost as if he were trying the name on for size. She didn't stop sweeping and didn't answer. "I'll be back," he said, his voice low, as he finally turned to walk away. "I'll be back tomorrow." And with that, he left, the sound of his boots fading into the wind, but the weight of her name still lingering in the air. Evelyn watched him go, the broom still in her hands, the dust still swirling. She didn't look back at him. She didn't need to. She knew he'd be back. They always came back. The man stepped inside, his boots scraping against the creaking floorboards. The door clicked shut behind him, and for a moment there was only silence. Thick, heavy silence that pressed down on him, as though the walls themselves had forgotten the sound of life. He stood there, just inside the threshold, taking it in. The room was dim, the light filtering through heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. Dust danced in the air like forgotten memories, clinging to old furniture, to picture frames, to everything. The woman moved quietly to the stove, her back to him as she began to prepare a meal. The flickering of the fire in the hearth cast a dull orange glow across her face, but she didn't turn to acknowledge him. She simply worked, her hands steady, practiced. It was as if she had done this 1,000 times before and 1,000 times again. The man shifted uncomfortably, his gaze drawn to the small details around him. A well-worn chair by the fireplace, the fabric torn at the edges, the stuffing beginning to show through. A faded rug on the floor, its colors long since bled out by time and sun. A shelf lined with old books, their spines cracked and yellowed. He didn't need to look at the titles. He knew what they were. It wasn't the first time he'd seen this kind of house. He had grown up in one, or something like it. The kind of place where time moved slower than the rest of the world, where everything held a story, even if it was a story no one was brave enough to tell. His eyes landed on a framed photograph on the mantel. A man and a woman smiling, their arms around each other. The man's face was weathered, his hair graying at the temples. The woman, younger than him, her eyes bright. The smile on her face didn't quite reach her eyes. The man's heart skipped. He'd seen that woman before. The memory hit him like a punch to the gut, sharp and sudden. He blinked, trying to push the thought aside. It was nothing. A stranger's face, nothing more. But it felt wrong. Everything about this place felt wrong, like a dream he couldn't wake from. The woman placed a skillet on the stove with a soft clink, the sound too loud in the quiet room. She glanced over her shoulder at him, her expression unreadable. "You don't need to stand there," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Take a seat." He hesitated for a moment before lowering himself onto the chair by the table. It creaked under his weight, the wood groaning like it hadn't been moved in years. He ran his hand along the surface of the table, the grain worn smooth from years of use. He could hear the woman working behind him, the quiet clink of utensils, the hiss of the stove. It was too quiet, too still, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The man's eyes drifted around the room again, landing on the corner by the door. A small rocking chair sat there, abandoned. The paint was chipped, the wood faded and cracked. It looked like it had been forgotten, left behind by someone who had no use for it anymore. His eyes narrowed. It was the same chair, the same one his mother used to rock in years ago. The memory flashed in his mind sharp and clear. He could almost hear the creak of the chair, the soft lull of the motion, his mother humming a tune under her breath. He looked away quickly, his breath catching in his throat. He didn't want to be here, didn't want to feel the weight of the past pressing in on him, but there was no getting away from it now. The woman moved around the room, her movements fluid, as though she had no intention of stopping. Her back was to him again, and he couldn't see her face, but he could feel her presence in the room, filling the space with something heavy, something old, the ghosts of things that had been left unsaid, left undone. He shifted in his seat, uneasy. His fingers tapped against the edge of the table, a nervous rhythm. "You've been here before," she said suddenly, her voice quiet but sharp. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. He hadn't meant to give himself away, but the woman had seen right through him, just like she had the first time he laid eyes on her. He started, but the words got stuck in his throat. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what he was looking for here. She didn't wait for him to finish. Instead, she turned, a plate in her hand. "Food's ready," she said. She placed the plate in front of him without another word. her eyes never meeting him. He glanced down at the food, his stomach twisting. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until now. But even as he picked up his fork, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that he was being watched, that there was more to this place than met the eye. The woman sat down across from him, her hands folding neatly in her lap. She didn't say anything else, just waited, like she always did. The man forced a bite of food into his mouth. It was dry, tasteless, but he chewed slowly, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in his chest, the feeling that he was on the edge of something, but he couldn't see what it was. Something was waiting, watching. The silence stretched on, thick and oppressive, but the woman didn't seem bothered by it. She sat still, her gaze focused on something he couldn't see. Maybe it was the past. Maybe it was him. He swallowed, and when he looked up again, she was still staring at him, her eyes cold and unreadable. And for a moment, the room felt even smaller, the air heavier. He had come looking for something. Answers, maybe. Or maybe just a reason to stop running. But whatever it was, he knew now it wasn't here. Not in this house. Not with her. There was nothing here but old ghosts and unspoken memories. And he was too tired to chase them anymore. The man's eyes drifted again, searching for something to anchor him, something to pull him away from the oppressive silence of the room. His gaze landed on the mantel, where a small, dusty frame sat among a handful of others, ignored and forgotten. The glass was smudged, the edges of the frame worn, as if it had been moved countless times, only to be left behind each time. His fingers moved almost without thought, his hand reaching out toward the photograph. The woman didn't stop him, didn't even look at him. Her gaze remained steady on the stove, the soft clink of the spoon against the pot, the only sound. But he could feel her watching him, her eyes cold, like she was waiting for him to make his move. He lifted the photo carefully, his breath catching in his throat as he took in the image. It was a young girl, maybe 8 or 9, her face full of life and innocence. She had wide brown eyes, and her hair was tied back in a messy braid, strands falling loose around her face. She smiled up at the camera, a smile that seemed to reach her eyes despite the faint sadness that lingered there. The man's hand trembled as he held the photo, his thumb brushing against the glass. He knew that face. He knew that smile. He'd seen it before, in the crumpled corners of his memory, in the faded photographs that lined his own childhood home. His heart skipped a beat. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice rough, hoarse. His eyes never left the picture, not even when he asked the question. It was the question that had been building in his chest since he first stepped into the house, the question that had been gnawing at him from the moment he saw her standing on the porch. The woman didn't answer immediately. Her back remained to him, the movements of her hands fluid and unhurried as she stirred the contents of the pot. She had to know what he was asking. I had to know what the photo meant. "Where did you get it?" he asked again, more forceful this time, stepping closer to the mantel. The photo was still in his hand, but his fingers were no longer trembling. They were clenched tightly around the frame, the pressure of his grip threatening to crack the glass. She finally turned to face him, her eyes dark and unreadable. There was no recognition in her gaze, no hint of surprise. She had known this moment was coming. It was only a matter of time. "You know where it came from," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. She didn't look at the photo, didn't even glance at it. She knew exactly what it meant to him, but she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of an answer. She never would. The man's jaw clenched. He could feel the blood rushing to his face, the heat of frustration rising inside him. He wanted to shout, wanted to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. The room was too small, too tight, and the woman's silence wrapped around him like a noose. "This is her, isn't it?" he finally asked, his voice breaking slightly. "This is my daughter." The woman's lips twitched just barely, as if she were suppressing a smile, or perhaps something darker. She didn't answer right away, just stood there, watching him with that same cold expression. He could feel the weight of her gaze, like she was measuring him, weighing his every move. "I don't know who you're talking about," she said after a moment, her tone flat, unfeeling. "But I do know this. You're not the first to ask questions about that photo." Her words hit him like a slap, and he staggered back, his heart racing. It was the first time she had acknowledged what he was really asking, but it was too little. Too late. Her words only raised more questions. and she wasn't about to provide any answers. "I'm not here to play games," he said, his voice low, but his anger rising. "I know what this means. I know who this is." The woman didn't flinch, didn't even move. She simply stood there, her eyes locked on his, as if daring him to push further. The power was hers now. She had control. "Then why don't you ask your questions?" she said, her voice cool and distant. "Why don't you ask the questions you came here to ask, instead of staring at an old photograph?" Her words stung, and the man's fists clenched at his sides. He had come here for answers, but all she was doing was pushing him further into the dark. He could feel the tension building, the pressure of the past threatening to break free, but she was not going to let it happen, not without her say-so. "I came here to find out what happened to my daughter," he said, his voice barely a whisper now, the weight of his words sinking in. "I came here to find the truth." The woman didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. The truth wasn't something she was going to give him. Not easily, at least. Not unless he played by her rules. "Take the photo," she said finally, her tone changing, softening just enough to make him hesitate. "But you won't find what you're looking for here." The man stared at her, the words sinking in like stones dropped into water. He had thought he was close to something, close to the truth, but the more he pushed, the further it seemed to slip away. She turned her back to him then, returning to the stove without another word. The photo was still in his hand, but it felt like nothing now. A piece of glass, a fragment of the past. He wanted to throw it down, wanted to shatter it into 1,000 pieces, but he didn't. He stood there for a long moment, the photo heavy in his hand, before he slowly placed it back on the mantel. The woman didn't watch him, didn't look up, but he knew she was still in control. And for the first time since he'd arrived, he wasn't sure if he'd ever find the answers he was looking for. The room was still, too still, and the weight of it pressed in on him. His eyes were fixed on the woman as she moved across the room, her hands moving in practiced silence. She was almost too calm, too composed, like she was already prepared for this moment, for him to crack. But he couldn't stop himself. He couldn't hold it in anymore. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice breaking. His chest tightened, a feeling he hadn't let himself feel in years. It surged up, fierce and uncontrolled. He'd been running from it for so long, but now it was here, crashing over him like a wave. "Where is my daughter?" The woman didn't answer. She didn't even look at him. But he could feel her presence in the room, thick, suffocating. Her silence only made it worse. "She was just a little girl," he muttered, his voice faltering. "She had so much life in her, so much." He couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of her laugh, the sound of her voice, the way she ran around the yard, calling for him, those memories were all he had left. They were all that remained of the girl he had lost. He felt a tremor run through his body, and his hands clenched into fists. He was losing control, but he didn't care. The walls of the house seemed to close in on him, suffocating him. He had to get it out, had to say it, had to finally admit it. "She disappeared," he said, his voice raw now, scraping at his throat. Just like that. Gone. His breath hitched in his chest. "I couldn't protect her. I couldn't." His words trailed off, and his head dropped into his hands. The grief hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. The woman remained silent, still, but he could feel her eyes on him. He didn't look up. He couldn't. The pain was too much, too fresh. It felt like it had happened just yesterday, even though it had been years. "I searched for her," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I searched every day. I called her name. I begged the world to give her back to me." He sat there, shaking, his head spinning with memories. The flashing lights of the police cars, the sirens wailing, the frantic search parties. The hours turned into days, then into weeks. And all the while, he never stopped hoping, never stopped believing she would come back. But she never did. A lump rose in his throat, and he fought to keep it down. "They never found her," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "They never found her, and I—" He stopped, unable to finish the thought. The woman finally moved, her gaze still fixed on him, but she didn't speak. She simply watched, her face unreadable, but something flickered in her eyes, something that made his stomach twist. He stood abruptly, anger bubbling up, mixing with the grief. He didn't want to feel this anymore. I didn't want to face it. "You don't know what it's like," he said, his voice rising. You don't know what it's like to lose your child, to not even know if they're alive or dead, to wonder if they're out there somewhere, suffering, to live with that guilt every single day." The woman's face tightened, her jaw clenching, but she still didn't speak. "Don't you dare look at me like that," he spat, taking a step forward. "Don't you dare look at me like I'm the one who did something wrong. I'm the one who's been living with this, not you." His breath was coming fast, too fast, and his chest felt tight. He couldn't control it anymore. His body was shaking, his heart pounding. The anger, the grief, the confusion, it was all swirling together, threatening to drown him. "I was a father," he said, the words coming out in a broken sob. "I was supposed to protect her. And I failed." The woman's eyes softened, just slightly, but she still didn't move. Her hands were folded in front of her, her posture still, but there was something in the way she was watching him that made him stop. Something in her gaze, something cold and distant, that made him hesitate. "You don't get to blame yourself," she said quietly, her voice low but steady. "You don't get to carry that on your own." He shook his head, disbelief flashing across his face. "What do you know about it? You don't even know her. You don't know what it was like." Her lips parted, but the words she spoke were slow, deliberate. "I know what it's like to lose someone, to carry the weight of their absence every day." The words hit him like a slap. His breath caught in his throat. He froze, his eyes locked on her, searching for some kind of sign, some clue, something that could tell him what she meant. For the first time, he saw something shift in her expression. A flicker of pain, something buried deep beneath the surface, but it was gone before he could grasp it. Her gaze hardened again, and she turned away from him, returning to the stove without another word. "The past always comes back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter how long you run from it, it will find you." He stood there, his heart thudding in his chest, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy blanket. He wanted to say something, wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the steady ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the seconds that passed between them. And then, in the silence, the man realized something. He had never been looking for answers. Not really. He had been running from them, running from the truth, from the past. And now, it was back. He wanted to ask her, to demand to know what she knew, but he was too tired to fight anymore. So instead, he stood there, listening to the soft echo of his own broken heart, the quiet in the room louder than any words could be. The past had returned, and there was no escaping it now. The man stood by the window, his eyes focused on the horizon, his thoughts lost in the silence of the room. It had been hours since he arrived, but it felt like days, or maybe even longer. The weight of the house, the memories, hung over him like a storm cloud, but no answers came. The woman moved quietly across the room, too calm, too collected. It was as if she had already prepared herself for him to crack, but he couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why won't you tell me?" His voice was harsh, breaking the stillness. "What's going on here? What's the connection between us?" She didn't turn around. Her back was to him as she wiped her hands on a rag, her movements slow and deliberate. It felt like she was pretending nothing had changed, but the tension in the room was thick, choking. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, almost too calmly. The man couldn't take it. He stepped forward, his frustration spilling over. "Don't lie to me. You know exactly what I mean. This house, this place, it's all pulling me back into something I thought I left behind. What's your part in this?" She didn't answer, only stood still, her hands steady as she continued to clean. The man felt his chest tighten, the air growing heavier with each passing second. His mind raced, desperate for answers. "What happened to my daughter?" he demanded, his voice breaking. "Where is she? Why does it feel like the past is coming back for both of us?" She remained silent, still. The room seemed to close in on him. He could feel her presence, like she was waiting for him to crack, to give her the opening she wanted. The silence stretched on, suffocating. He couldn't stand it anymore. He moved toward her, his voice rising with anger. "Tell me. I've searched for years, and now I come here, and everything's so damn familiar. What do you know about her? About me?" The woman turned, slowly, almost too deliberately. She faced him, her expression unreadable, her eyes, cold as stone, locked onto his. Without a word, she reached for the sleeve of her shirt. The man's eyes followed her hand, curiosity mixing with dread. Slowly, she rolled the sleeve up, exposing her forearm, and there it was. A scar, a burn mark, a firebrand branded into her skin. The shape was unmistakable, a symbol he knew all too well. His heart skipped a beat. "What the hell is this?" he whispered, stepping closer. How do you have that?" She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "It's nothing," she said softly, her voice calm. "Just a mark." But the man's fingers trembled as they reached out, almost involuntarily. He wanted to touch it, to understand, but the air between them was charged with something darker. "It's not just a mark," he said, his voice rising again. "What does it mean? How did you get it?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, something hidden in them, but she quickly masked it. "It's a part of me," she said, her voice suddenly colder. "Just like it's a part of you." The man's breath caught in his throat. The firebrand. He had seen one just like it, years ago, burned into the flesh of someone else. Someone he had once known. Someone he had failed. "Tell me what this means," he said, his voice cracking. "You can't just leave it like this. You can't just stand there with that thing on your arm and pretend it doesn't matter." She didn't move, didn't flinch, but her lips tightened. She was holding something back, something he wasn't ready to face. "You're not the first one to ask about it," she said, almost too quietly. "But you're not ready for the truth. Not yet." His mind raced, but his body froze. The mark, the house, the past. It was all coming together in a way that made him feel like he was losing control. "You think I'm the one who's not ready?" he spat, his voice rising again. "I've been searching for years, looking for anything that could explain what happened to my daughter. And you—" "I know what you're looking for," she interrupted, her voice suddenly harsh. "But you're not going to find it here. Not in me. Not in this place." The man's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what you know. I'm not walking away from this. Not again." The woman's gaze softened just for a second, but it was enough. It was enough to make his heart race, to make him feel like something important was about to be revealed. But just as quickly, her expression hardened again. "You're not ready for the answer," she said, her voice low. "Not yet." He took a step back, his body trembling. The scar on her arm burned into his mind, the same shape as his own, the mark of something unspoken, something buried deep. "I'll be back," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "And next time, you won't be able to hide it." She didn't say anything as he turned to leave, but her eyes followed him, cold and calculating. The firebrand, the mark of the past, burned in his mind, and he knew that whatever this woman was hiding, it would come to light soon. It had to. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The night was still, almost suffocating. The man lay in the dark, the flicker of the fire in the hearth, casting long shadows on the walls. He couldn't sleep, not tonight, not with the whispers that had crept into his mind. At first, he had thought it was the wind, the house settling, but it was different. There was a voice, faint, low, almost pleading. He had tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself it was nothing, but it only grew louder, more distinct, until it was undeniable. The whisper came from the well. He sat up suddenly, his heart racing, sweat beaded on his forehead. The well outside. It had always been there, a dark, foreboding presence just beyond the house. But now it felt alive, filled with something ancient, something waiting. He couldn't stay inside, couldn't ignore it any longer. Throwing on his coat, he stepped outside. The cold air hit him like a slap, but he barely noticed. His boots crunched on the frost-covered ground as he made his way to the well, the whispers still echoing in his ears. The well stood in the corner of the yard, its stone walls covered in creeping vines, the cover half removed as though someone, or something, had disturbed it recently. The whispers were louder now, clear and distinct. They called to him, beckoning him closer. He reached the edge of the well, staring into the darkness. The smell of damp stone and decay filled his nostrils. He leaned over, peering into the blackness, but saw nothing, just the void. The voice grew louder, but still he couldn't make out the words. He clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. "Who's there?" he called into the well, his voice shaking. "What do you want?" The wind howled in answer, but nothing else. The whispering stopped, leaving only the emptiness behind. His legs felt weak, his mind racing. He took a step back, trying to calm his breathing. Was it just his mind playing tricks on him? The weight of the past, the long-buried memories rising to the surface. He didn't know. He only knew the voice had felt real. It felt like a call, a pull from something buried deep within the earth. Turning away from the well, he headed back toward the house, his thoughts clouded. His boots scraped against the frozen ground, the sound too loud in the stillness. The whispers were gone, but the tension in the air remained, thick and heavy. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for him to uncover it. He pushed open the door to the house, his heart racing. The woman was nowhere to be seen. The house was empty, its silence stretching like a weight in the room. His eyes scanned the shadows, looking for any sign of her, but there was nothing. The whispers, the feeling, it was all becoming too much. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He needed answers. He needed to confront her. He crossed the darkened hallway and entered the kitchen, his boots echoing on the wood floor. He grabbed a glass of water, his hands shaking, but the glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound too sharp in the silence. He didn't bend to pick it up. Instead, he turned and went straight for the door. Outside again, the night air bit at his skin. The wind had died down, but the atmosphere was still thick with something unspoken. He moved toward the porch, his footsteps slow, deliberate. The house loomed behind him, silent as ever. He stopped near the steps, looking out into the yard. The well was just visible in the moonlight, its shape dark and ominous. He heard the door creak behind him, the sound so familiar, yet it made him freeze. The woman stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light from inside. She didn't speak, but her presence was enough to make the air grow colder. He turned to face her, his fists clenched at his sides. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice trembling with the weight of his frustration. "What's down there?" He pointed to the well, his hand shaking with rage. "Why is it calling to me?" She didn't move, didn't say anything. Her expression was unreadable, but he could see the flicker of something behind her eyes, something darker, something ancient. She was holding something back, and he wasn't going to let her hide it anymore. "I know you know," he said, his voice low but sharp. "I know you hear it too. The whispers. What is it? What's in that?" "Well?" Her gaze didn't waver. "It's not for you to know," she said, her voice steady, calm, like she had expected at this moment. His heart pounded in his chest. "You can't just leave it like this," he shouted, stepping toward her. "I've been asking for answers since I got here, and all you do is hide them from me. What's down there? What happened?" She took a step back, her eyes cold. "Some things are better left buried," she said, her voice like ice. "You don't want to know what's buried beneath this land." The words hit him like a punch, and for a moment he could barely breathe. The air felt too thick, the silence too loud. He was standing on the edge of something, and the deeper he dug, the more it seemed like he was losing himself to it. Without another word, she turned and walked back into the house, leaving him standing in the cold, the whispering still ringing in his ears, louder now than ever. There were things buried here, things he wasn't ready to face. And he was starting to realize that the past wasn't just waiting for him, it was pulling him under. The house was quiet, too quiet. The man's footsteps echoed as he wandered through the narrow hall, his eyes scanning the old furniture, the forgotten corners. He had been searching for hours, his mind clouded with questions, with memories that had long been buried. The well, the whispers, the firebrand scar. It was all too much. Something wasn't right, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. His hand brushed against a drawer in the hallway cabinet, its wood worn and old. His eyes narrowed. He hadn't noticed it before, hadn't thought to open it. But now, something about it pulled him in. He yanked it open, the drawer creaking in protest, and rifled through the clutter inside. There was something there. A small faded envelope, yellowed with age, its edges frayed. His breath caught. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. He had seen it countless times before. It was his daughter's. He pulled the letter from the drawer, his hands trembling. It felt heavier than it should, as if the weight of the past had settled into its fragile paper. He opened it carefully, his fingers unsteady, and unfolded the letter. The ink was smudged in places, but the words were still clear. "Dear Dad," it began, the familiar words like a punch to the gut. He paused, the lump in his throat growing. His heart raced, and for a moment he didn't want to read any further, but he forced himself to, his eyes scanning the page. I don't know where I am or why I'm writing this. I just need to tell you something. I'm scared. I don't know who I'm with, but it's not who I thought. I keep hearing things that don't make sense. I'm so sorry for everything. Please, don't look for me. I can't explain, but I think I'm in trouble." The words blurred as his eyes filled with tears. He couldn't breathe. He had seen this handwriting before. He had held it in his hands 1,000 times, but now it was like a cruel joke, like the past had come back to mock him. He read the next part aloud, his voice barely above a whisper, the words thick with emotion. "I don't want to be here. I don't want to be where I am, but I don't know how to get out. Please, Dad, don't come looking for me. I'm afraid you'll never find me." His hand shook as he lowered the letter, his gaze unfocused. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in on him. This letter, this message from his daughter, was a final plea, a confession of her fear and helplessness. It was the last piece of her he would ever have, and it was too much for him to carry. He felt a tear slip down his cheek, his throat tight. He had failed her. He had failed to protect her. All these years, all the searching, and now, this letter. The truth had been here all along, hidden in the past. The woman had known. She had known all along. He looked up, his eyes blurry with tears. She was standing in the doorway, watching him. Her face was cold, harder than he had ever seen it before. There was no sympathy, no understanding, just a distant, emotionless stare. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "How long have you known about this?" She didn't answer at first. She just stood there, her posture stiff, her arms crossed. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, the weight of the truth hanging in the air. Finally she spoke, her voice low, almost inaudible. "I've known for a long time," she said, her words biting. "I didn't want to tell you. It wasn't my place to tell you." The man's chest tightened. "What do you mean it wasn't your place?" he demanded, his voice rising. "You think I wouldn't want to know? You think I wouldn't want to hear this all these years, and you never told me? You let me search for her, let me think she was gone, and you knew. You knew where she was." She took a step toward him, her eyes colder than ever. "You don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly sharp, cutting through his anger. "It wasn't about you. It was about protecting her. I couldn't let you destroy everything, destroy her." He stared at her, the words hitting him like a slap. "Protect her?" he repeated, disbelief in his voice. "How could you protect her by keeping this from me, by letting me suffer all these years thinking I failed her?" "I did what I thought was right," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "What I thought would keep her safe." He shook his head, the weight of her words sinking in. "Safe," he echoed bitterly. "What good is safety if she's alone? What good is protecting her if she's still gone?" The woman's face softened just slightly, but there was no warmth in her expression. She took another step closer, her voice quieter now, almost gentle. "You don't understand, but you will. One day, you'll understand why I couldn't tell you. Why did it had to be this way?" The man's mind raced, but the words felt distant now, blurred by the grief that threatened to swallow him whole. He looked down at the letter again, the words searing into him. "Don't come looking for me." But he had looked, he had searched for years, and now the truth was in his hands. His daughter had been trying to tell him, trying to save him from the pain of knowing. He closed his eyes, letting the tears fall freely. There was no answer, no resolution, only the crushing weight of the past, and the knowledge that he would never be able to undo what had been done. And the woman watched him, her expression unreadable, as the truth finally took root. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The man sat across from the woman, his eyes never leaving her face. The silence between them was heavy, thick with unspoken words, and he could feel it pressing down on him, suffocating him. He had asked the questions, demanded the answers, but every time he thought he was getting closer, she pulled away, deeper into the shadows of her own past. But tonight, something felt different. The weight of the silence had shifted, and he could sense that she was finally ready to speak, to tell him the things he had been chasing, the things he had been running from. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked, his voice low, raw. "Why did you let me believe she was gone? You knew where she was. You knew all along." The woman didn't look at him at first. Her eyes were focused on the fire, watching the dance of the flames as if they held the answers to everything she had buried. She took a deep breath, and for a moment, the house seemed to hold its breath with her. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice soft, but it carried an undertone of something else, something dark. "I didn't want to make you face the truth." "The truth," he repeated, his frustration growing. "The truth is what's been eating at me for years. I need to know what happened to my daughter. I need to know why you kept it from me." Her eyes finally lifted to meet his, and for the first time, he saw something shift in them. Something old, something he hadn't seen before. "You don't understand," she said, her voice laced with a quiet intensity. "What you think happened, it's not how you remember it. What you think you know, it's a lie." His heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? What lie?" The woman stood, pacing slowly in front of the fireplace, her hands clenched at her sides. "You think you lost her," she said, her voice rising. "But you didn't. Not the way you think. She wasn't just taken. She wasn't just gone." The man's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" he demanded. "What happened to her? Tell me what you're saying." Her gaze turned cold, distant as she looked at him. "She wasn't taken. She walked away. And she left because of you." The words hit him like a slap. He stood up, the shock of it rattling his bones. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That's not possible. She would never leave. She wouldn't just—" She didn't have a choice. The woman interrupted, her voice sharp now. "You think she disappeared by some twist of fate? That's not how it happened. She chose to leave, chose to run away from everything, from you, from this house, from this place." He staggered backward, his mind reeling, unable to comprehend what she was saying. She would never— "She did," she said, cutting him off again. "And you'll never understand why. Because the truth is something you can't face. You can't handle it. You never could." The man's heart raced, his breath shallow. "What did I do? What could I have possibly done to make her run from me?" His voice cracked, the emotion choking him. "I loved her. I gave her everything." The woman's face softened, but there was no warmth in her expression. "You loved her, but you didn't protect her, not the way she needed. You were too focused on your own pain to see what was happening to her." The man's stomach twisted. He could feel the walls closing in, suffocating him. "What do you mean? What happened to her? Where is she now?" The woman was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was laced with something darker, more unsettling. "She's not where you think she is. She's not with you. She's not anywhere you can find her." He took a step forward, desperation bleeding into his words. "Where is she? Please, tell me." The woman's eyes darkened, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "She's buried in a place you never thought to look. A place you couldn't see because you were too blinded by your own grief." He stepped back, the air thick with disbelief. "Buried?" he whispered. "What are you saying?" The woman's eyes met him again, and for the first time he saw the truth in them. The pain, the regret, the things she had kept hidden for so long. "She's buried here," she said softly, "in this land, in this house, the house that's kept its secrets for years, and she's never going to leave it, not until the truth is told." The man's breath caught in his throat. His mind couldn't process the words, couldn't understand what she was saying. He had spent years looking for her, searching for any trace of her, and now she was telling him that she had never left, that she was here, buried beneath the house he had called home. "No," he said again, more firmly this time, but there was no conviction in his voice. "No, this can't be true. This can't—" "It is," she said quietly. "You weren't the only one who lost her. I did too, but I couldn't stop it, and neither could you." The man stumbled back, the weight of her words pressing down on him. His world was shifting, breaking apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He wanted to scream, wanted to shout, but the silence in the room swallowed him whole. The truth had come crashing down, and now there was no going back. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words. The man stood by the window, his hands clenched at his sides, staring out into the empty yard. The weight of everything, the firebrand, the whispers, the secrets, pressed down on him, suffocating him. He couldn't breathe. Not after what she had told him. Not after the truth had finally spilled from her lips. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice raw, hoarse. His mind raced, but his thoughts were jumbled, like a puzzle he couldn't solve. He couldn't look at her. Not yet. Not after everything she had revealed. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about that mark?" The woman didn't move. She stood across the room, her back to him, the faint flicker of the firelight casting shadows on her face. She hadn't said a word since their last exchange, but he could feel her eyes on him, cold and calculating. "I told you," she said finally, her voice low, almost whispering. "It was a mark of ownership." He turned sharply, his heart hammering in his chest. "What? A mark of ownership? You're telling me that scar wasn't an accident?" His words came out in a rush, a mixture of disbelief and anger. "That it was deliberate?" She didn't flinch. She just stood there, her hands folded in front of her, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she said, her voice even, as though this was just another fact in a long line of truths he wasn't ready to hear. "It was a brand, a mark to show that she belonged to me." He took a step forward, his fists tightening. "Belong to you," he echoed, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "What the hell does that mean? You branded her? Like some kind of animal?" The woman didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but the faintest shift in her posture was enough to tell him that she had seen this coming. She had known this conversation would happen eventually. "It's not as simple as that," she said quietly. "But yes, she was mine. She belonged to this family, to this land." The man's stomach twisted. His pulse quickened. "Number you. This isn't right. You can't just—" He broke off, his voice trembling with rage. He wanted to shout, wanted to hurl the truth back at her, but it stuck in his throat, like the words weren't his own anymore. "You don't understand," she said, her voice now sharper, colder. "You never did. You were too busy thinking about what you lost to see what was happening to her." He took another step toward her, his body trembling. "What are you saying?" He spat. "That I didn't protect her. That I—" "Yes," she interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "You couldn't protect her. You were too consumed with your own pain to see what she was becoming. You didn't see the mark on her soul before it was too late." His chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. "You were supposed to protect her," he shouted, taking another step forward, his anger bubbling over. "You were the one who should have kept her safe. You could have stopped this, but you didn't. You let it happen. You let her be branded." The woman's eyes flashed with something darker, something that made his skin crawl. "I couldn't stop it," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The power was already there. It runs in the blood. It's in the soil. It's in everything here. The land, the family, the name. You think it was just her that was marked? Number, we all are. We all carry it." The man's mind was reeling. He couldn't process it all. The land, the family, the blood, everything she was saying made him feel like he was sinking deeper into something he didn't understand. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice trembling. This isn't normal. You can't—" "No," she cut him off, her voice rising now, matching his intensity. "It's not normal, but it's the way it's always been. The land claims us. It owns us. And we belong to it, whether we like it or not." His mind flashed back to his daughter, her face, her laughter, the years of searching, the pain of not knowing. He had tried to protect her, tried to shield her from whatever had haunted this place. But now it felt like he had been fighting a losing battle the whole time. The weight of it settled in his chest, heavy and suffocating. The woman took a step toward him, closing the distance. "You think the land doesn't have power over us," she said, her voice colder than ever. "You think you can escape it? It's in our blood. It's in the bones of this house, and it's in her. It was always going to be her. Always." The man's head spun. The truth was too much to take in, too much to bear. "You've been lying to me," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "All these years you've been lying. You let me search for her, let me think I was losing my mind. But you knew. You knew the whole time." She didn't deny it. She didn't need to. The truth was in her eyes, in the coldness that had settled there. "I didn't lie," she said simply. "I just didn't tell you everything. You weren't ready. None of you were." The man stepped back, his body trembling, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "I don't believe this," he said, his voice breaking. I can't believe any of this." The woman's gaze hardened. "You'll have to, because there's nothing you can do about it now. You can't change what's already been done. You can't take it back." The man's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, to scream, but the words wouldn't come. The room felt too small, the air too thick. The past was suffocating him, and there was nothing he could do to escape it. In that moment, the truth settled into him like a stone, heavy and cold. He was trapped. He had always been trapped, and now there was no way out. The night had fallen heavy, and the air hung thick with an oppressive stillness. The woman led him across the yard, her steps steady, almost deliberate, as if she knew the ground beneath them far better than he ever would. The man followed reluctantly, his feet dragging in the cold earth, a weight settling deep within his chest. His mind still churned, but each thought seemed to slip away from him, lost in the shadow of what was to come. They walked toward the edge of the property, past the overgrown garden and the crooked trees. The distant hum of insects buzzed in the air, but otherwise there was only silence. The house loomed behind them, dark and imposing, a silent witness to the tension that stretched between them. "You've already seen it," the woman said quietly, her voice colder than the night. "But you haven't really looked." He didn't respond. His throat was tight, his mind still reeling from the revelations that had unraveled the fabric of his world. The firebrand, the well, the whispers. It was all too much. And now she was leading him to something he didn't want to see, to a truth he wasn't sure he could bear. They reached the edge of the property, where the land sloped downward, hidden by trees. The woman stopped, and the man nearly collided with her. He looked up, his heart sinking when he saw the grave. It was small, unmarked, nestled in the earth like it had been forgotten, abandoned. Overgrown vines and weeds had long since claimed the plot, wrapping around the stones as if trying to hide it from the world. The headstone was barely visible, its surface eroded and cracked, the name faded by time. "This is where she is," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the earth beneath him, the weight of it pressing up, as if the land itself was alive, breathing, pulling at him. He knelt down, brushing away the weeds, revealing the name etched into the stone. It was her name, his daughter's name. His breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled as he read the inscription, the truth slamming into him like a tidal wave. She had never left. She had never been taken. She had been here all along, buried beneath the soil of the house that had once been their home. "I don't understand," he said, his voice cracking. She's here? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you—" "Because I couldn't." The woman interrupted, her eyes distant, her voice steady but heavy with a truth she had long kept hidden. "It wasn't my place to tell you. It was always meant to be. This way. It was never meant for you to find her, to dig up the past." The man stood up, his legs shaky beneath him. "What are you talking about? What is this? Why didn't you stop me from searching? Why let me suffer all these years?" She didn't flinch. Her gaze locked onto his with a coldness that sent a chill down his spine. "Because it had to be you," she said, her words slow and deliberate. "It had to be your reckoning, not mine." He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He couldn't process it, couldn't understand. How could this be? His daughter, buried here in this very place. It felt impossible, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. "You were never meant to find her," the woman continued. "This house, this land, it's all part of the cycle, the legacy of our families. You thought you could escape it, but you never could. None of us can. We're bound to it." His pulse quickened, the air growing colder with every word she spoke. "What do you mean? What do you mean, bound to it?" She looked down at the grave, her face unreadable. "This land isn't just land. It's cursed. It's the bloodline. The same blood that runs through me runs through her. And now it runs through you." He stepped back, the ground beneath him shifting like it was moving. His breath came in shallow gasps. "Number this. This can't be true. This can't be what you're saying. You're lying." "I'm not," she said simply. "You think this is all an accident? That you lost your daughter to some cruel twist of fate? Number, it was always part of the plan. The blood, the land, the power. It all ties together. We are nothing but vessels for it." He staggered back, his mind whirling, 1,000 thoughts crashing together in a blur of confusion. "I don't want to hear this," he muttered, shaking his head. "This isn't real. This isn't what happened." The woman didn't move. "You've seen the signs, the scar, the well, the whispers, all of it. It's been pulling you back here for a reason. Your fate was always tied to this place, to me, and to her. He felt the weight of her words like a physical blow. His knees felt weak, and for the first time he realized how truly powerless he was. This wasn't just about his daughter anymore. This wasn't just about what had happened to her. This was about something much darker, something older, something he couldn't escape. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the truth. "No," he whispered again, more to himself than to her. "I can't accept this." "You already have," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "It's too late." The man stood there for a long moment, his body trembling, his mind reeling. He had spent years searching, chasing after answers, running from the truth. But now, standing here in the cold night, with the weight of the past pressing down on him, he knew there was no escaping it. There was no running from the blood, the soil, the curse that had always been there. The man finally turned away from the grave, his head spinning, his heart heavy. He had found what he had been searching for, but it wasn't the answer he had hoped for. It was something darker, something that would never let him go. And as he walked back toward the house, he realized that his fate and his daughter's had always been written in the land. And now it was his turn to face it. The wind howled through the trees, whipping the branches like angry fingers. The man stood in the yard, the moon hanging low and cold in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. His breath came in ragged bursts, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the curse hung heavy on him now, the truth settling in like the chill that wrapped itself around his bones. He had been a fool, searching for answers, thinking he could outrun the past. But now it was clear. The past had always been here, buried in the soil, in the blood of his family. He had thought he could escape it, thought he could leave it behind, but the curse was inescapable. It ran through him, through his daughter, through the woman standing silently beside him. She had never spoken of it, never told him what it truly meant to be part of this land, part of this bloodline. But now, in the quiet of the night, with the weight of everything pressing in on him, it was clear. "Tell me," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "What is it? This curse? What does it mean for me? For my daughter?" The woman didn't respond immediately. She stood still, her eyes fixed on the ground, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, her gaze was colder than ever. "It means what it always has," she said softly. "You are bound to this land, to this family. There is no escape." He turned to face her, his fists clenched at his sides. "No," he said, his voice rising. "I can't accept that. I won't be a part of this. I won't be tied to this curse." The woman's eyes softened, but there was no sympathy in them. "You don't understand," she said, her voice calm but heavy with truth. "You've always been a part of it. From the moment you were born, the blood ran in your veins. It's not something you can fight. It's not something you can outrun." The man's chest tightened. His mind reeled as the weight of her words hit him like a hammer. The bloodline, the legacy. He had always known there was something dark about this place, something buried in the land. But now, it felt like it was consuming him, dragging him into the depths of something he couldn't control. "Then what choice do I have?" he asked, his voice rough. "What's left for me, if I can't escape it? Then what?" The woman stepped closer, her eyes meeting him with a piercing gaze. "You have two choices," she said, her voice low. "Revenge or redemption. One will set you free, the other will bind you to this place forever." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of a decision he didn't want to make. Revenge, redemption, both offered something, but neither could undo the damage that had already been done. He could feel the pull of both options, each one beckoning to him, each one offering a different path. "Revenge," he said, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "Is that what you want? You want me to take vengeance on the ones who did this to us?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Revenge is not mine to offer," she said, her voice cold. "It is yours. You carry the weight of the past in your hands. You decide how you will wield it." The man's mind spun. He could see it now, the power he had been given, the power that ran in his veins. But with that power came a price. The curse was not just a story. It was a reality, a truth that had been buried beneath layers of lies, beneath years of running from the past. "But what about redemption?" he asked, his voice hoarse, a hint of desperation creeping into it. "How do I redeem myself? How do I break free from this legacy?" The woman's expression softened just slightly, but there was no warmth in her eyes. Redemption means letting go, she said quietly. It means choosing to break the cycle, to stop the blood from flowing. But it will cost you. You will have to leave this land, leave behind everything that ties you to it. You'll have to choose whether to walk away from the legacy that has defined you or to accept it and live with the consequences. The man closed his eyes, his mind whirling. The land, the curse, the bloodline, it was all too much to bear. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, the suffocating grip of something older than him, older than anyone. His thoughts turned to his daughter, to the life she had never gotten to live, to the choices he had made that had led him here. He had spent so many years trying to protect her, trying to save her, but now he saw it. The truth. He could not undo the past. He could not change what had happened, but he could choose what to do next. The wind howled again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the same wind that had blown through his past, through his memories. This was the wind of the future, the wind of the choice he had to make. "I don't know if I can ever be free," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but I know I can't stay here. I can't keep living in the shadow of this curse." The woman didn't respond, but her eyes softened just enough to show that she understood. He was making his choice, and with it, he was stepping into the unknown. The man turned away from her, the weight of his decision settling into him. Revenge, redemption, there was no easy path, but he knew one thing now. The past was no longer his to carry. It was time to make his own fate, and whatever it was, it would follow him beyond the grave. The wind had died down, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves in the trees. The air felt thicker now, pressing on his chest with the weight of what had passed. The man stood still, his back to the house, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He could feel the land around him, quiet and heavy, like it was holding its breath, waiting for him to make a final decision. The woman stood at a distance, her gaze distant, as if she were already lost in something he couldn't reach. He could hear her breathing, steady and even, but the silence stretched between them like a taut wire, neither of them willing to cross it. "You've made your choice," she said, her voice soft, but there was an edge to it. "But you don't know what it will cost." He didn't turn to face her. He didn't need to. The choice had already been made, even if he hadn't fully understood it until now. "I can't stay," he said quietly, the words feeling heavier than they should. Not after everything. Her silence was the answer he expected. The tension between them thickened, but this time it didn't feel like an argument. It felt like an end. "I'm letting it die," he continued, his voice breaking just slightly, but there was no hesitation in his steps as he began to walk away. The past. It's done. He couldn't look back. He didn't want to see her eyes, cold and knowing, staring at him, watching him leave. He had tried to outrun it for so long, but it had always been here, woven into the land, into his blood, and now he was finally letting it go. The woman didn't follow. She didn't speak. The sound of his footsteps was the only sound between them, the quiet of the night swallowing everything else. His heart beat louder than the world around him. The land stretched before him, dark and empty, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of it pressing on him. He was free. Free from the curse, from the bloodline, from the past. But the price was steep. The land had claimed everything it wanted, and now it would let him go. He paused at the edge of the property, looking back at the house one last time. The silence was complete now, as if the earth itself had stopped moving. The woman remained where she was, her silhouette barely visible in the fading light. She had been right, in the end. There was no escaping the past. But there was a way to let it die, to stop running, to stop being haunted by the echoes of things that could never be fixed. His breath was steady now, his chest no longer tight with the weight of everything he had carried. The decision had been made, and as he stepped away from the house, the land behind him seemed to release its grip. The air felt lighter, the silence stretched out in front of him, but it wasn't empty. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of peace. The man walked on, the faintest whisper of the wind brushing past. Him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he didn't need to. For the first time, the future felt like his to shape. The house, the grave, the firebrand, they were all behind him now, left to rest in the soil. There was nothing more to be done, and as he walked away, the weight of the past finally finally lifted. The silence was no longer haunting. It was freeing. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, and now there was only the road ahead, and it was quiet.